All right, mate. I think we hit record. I think we're good to go. So let's start with this. Why don't we just go with the full name? Isaac Keith Stubblety-Cook. Is that right?
It's a long one, yeah. That's correct.
Isaac. Oh, how come you don't go with Isaac? You don't like that?
I had growing up, I had quite a few Isaacs going to school together, so I always was defaulted to Zach because they always came before me on the roll. So it just kind of stuck, and it's a bit easier to go with when you have such a long last name as well.
Yeah, you do have a long last name. What's the background with the last name?
So it's mum and dad's last names. So
Ah,
mum's Stublety and dad's Cook. So
nice.
yeah, couldn't decide, so we decided with both.
What about the middle name, Keith? Where'd that come from?
That's my granddad's old name.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah.
Nice. Granddad still firing?
Nah, no. Both grandparents or granddads have passed away.
Mm.
Just one grandparent left, but it's nice to keep his name going.
Did you get time with him? Did he have an influence on your life? The Keith one, anyway.
No, Keith didn't have too much influence. He passed away soon, just before I was born.
Mm.
So yeah, apparently I'm a lot like him, but
Mm.
you know, it's always interesting having that like grandparent influence. I know like my grandparent um, Pa, who passed away just before the Olympics, definitely had influence on my life, knowing that he lived a full life and a great
Mm.
life, in that he always looked after his family, and it's something that I definitely try and bring into you know my life.
I didn't reflect too much when I was your age. I've started to reflect more as I've got older, but it's interesting. You see your grandparents and even your parents for that matter as just people, but you don't realize that they were young once and they had their own childhood and they had their own teenage years. And have you had a chance to reflect on who your parents were before they had you? Other than just being your parents, have you had a chance to kind of go back and analyze their life a little bit or ask them questions about that? Are you that type of guy?
Yeah, I'm definitely love to reflect. I think like for me, it's probably only in the recent years when you start to like mature in your life and start to make some
Mm,
more life changing decisions. Like looking at X, Y, Z, and but like I mean, for me, that's when you start to go. You want to give your kids the opportunities your parents gave you, and I think
mm,
that's for me at the core of it, and I think that's what for me my parents gave me was every opportunity I wanted to do. If I wanted to play water polo, if I wanted to swim, if I wanted to play soccer, like it was never no. It was how can we do this?
mm.
And I think then when you look at their lives, like they've given up a lot once the kids are born, but you don't realize that until you get a bit older and go like, oh my gosh, like life's
Mm.
life's pretty expensive and life like moves pretty fast and there's only a limited amount of time. So I think that's probably the reflection I've had. I think you realize they were this age once too and going through all the same things. And that's, I think, a nice place to be into when you get to ask them how they dealt with transitions in their life.
Mm,
Uh,
mm. What about the genetics? Where do you get where'd the breaststroker come from?
no idea. Like, I mean, mum swum all through high school, but not any further, and then played tennis for a lot of her university and mid 20s. And
Mm.
dad played rugby in Victoria, of all places. So he
Mm.
played for Victoria playing rugby union. So, like, I'm not sure where A, swimming even comes from, or B, breaststroke. So, um, yeah, because like I can't play tennis and I cannot play rugby. So,
But breaststrokers seem to be born, and it seems that when you throw them in a pool, they automatically start to do frog-like things. Was that the case for you? Did you not ever have a flutter kick? Was it always a breaststroke kick?
yeah, I always like had that weird freestyle turnout breaststroke kick, as people like to say it is, and
Yeah,
it's like almost jellyfish legs.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think I was lucky. Like I swum breaststroke from a young age, and like was taught breaststroke from a young age. I mean, I can still have a vivid memory of like because it's one of my good primary school friends, one of my best mates at primary school. His mum taught was one of the people that taught me to swim,
Mm,
and one of the quite a few people that taught me. But I remember, like, I can still specifically remember like this lying on a table and her pulling me through a breaststroke kick, and like it feeling so like natural, and then getting in the water and just being able to do it and enjoying it.
Have you had a chance to go back and see her at any point? Because I'm sure, like, just even that memory for her would be something pretty special. You've gone on to become Olympic champion, and for that memory that you have of her teaching you how to do a breaststroke kick, that's pretty cool, you know?
Yeah, like I've definitely kept in contact with a few of them, like obviously Deb, and there's another swim coach called Chris as well. And then recently kind of touched base with probably my first kind of proper swim coach as well. And we have a bit of a rapport now, and like that's been really cool to be able to like keep all those contact points, because all those people are really special. Like everyone, you know, like at the end of the day looks at Vince and goes, you know, oh, he got in there. It's like, no, this is a 20-year project. Like this isn't the last 6 months. Like, and I think that's been really rewarding, being able to like being grateful to those people, and also like give them the credit where credit's due, I guess.
Yeah, I can look back at the starting point and see where it ended up, and you're certainly at the back end of that, because you've had a 20-year career. You're not going to necessarily go on for another 20 years. So you at some point, you know, you've had an amazing run at this. But like, do you look back at points and say, oh, it could have ended there? Like, were there points where you almost walked away from this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like there's one point, I think 2015 is the first one that comes to mind. And that was like I had shoulder surgery. I just like committed to extending my schooling so that I could focus on swimming. And it was like this weird transition period where it was like swimming became the priority. And then suddenly I was injured and not able to swim. So like I was going through that point, just being like, well, am I going to get through this? And was this the right decision to push swimming? And then I kind of made a pact with myself that if I wasn't to make a senior Australian team by the age of 20 or 21, then that would be it. I'd say that was, you know, I gave it my best crack and was very measured in that approach, being like, I'm going to give it my all before then. But if it doesn't work out, then I have plenty of time for plan B. And I think that was a big turning point where it taught me a lot of lessons. I committed to moving clubs and those kind of things relatively soon after that. And that kind of set me on the path into Tokyo. And then I think as well, 2018, I'd just moved to Vince 2 years ago, 2 years before that, and like just missed the team. 17, swum like the best I'd ever swum, obviously, but like just missed the team, was second in the 2 breast and fourth in the 100 breast. So, you know, just off the mark, and I thought I was capable of getting there in 17. And then 18, com games, fast forward, performing okay at trials, not quite getting there, similar time to the year before, and then swimming, you know, 2:15.
Yeah,
it was terrible. And like, it's those moments that you go like, why am I doing this? Like, am I ever gonna get better or get to where I believe I can? So they're 2 big moments where I like definitely questioned like, what's the point? Like, you have that thought.
right.
So for me,
And
those are 2.
and in that too, like there's commitment points, right? Like you have that you know, come to Jesus moment kind of thing where it's like, okay, this is it. I got to make a decision here. But then there's these commitment points that you have to hit on at that point too, to say, well, I've got to make changes and I've got to commit to those changes. So like, talk me through, and this can be for anybody, right? Like these are relatable commitment points. Like I think a lot of swimmers are trying to figure out, well, you know, they say to themselves, well, he's an Olympic champion. He was born to be that or whatever. And you realize, no. I almost gave up at this point. Like it almost didn't happen. And so I'm just like you, I had to hit these commitment points. So it's like, they're very relatable. So what are some relatable commitment points that you went through in order to become kind of that Olympic champion?
I mean, the commitment points in those probably after that, when you realize, if I'm going to do this, I need to be all in.
Right.
And it's like, I read recently, like, I've been reading a book called Essentialism, and it was very relatable to these points. It's like all about this idea of going big on less. So, like, you know, having 3 pillars of your life, but those pillars being all in on all of them.
Right.
And if it doesn't align to those 3 things, then, or the question I guess you have to ask yourself, is it going to make the boat go faster? And like, ultimately for me, that was the biggest shift, where you have lots of voices when you're coming up and trying to climb the ladder, of lots of different perspectives of how everyone believes you can get there. And I totally am appreciative of so many voices, but at the same time, you have to commit to what you believe in and what you're going to get the most out of. And ultimately, that comes back to your purpose and your drive and what motivates you. So it's like, for me, it's less about one specific commitment point, but then taking it, almost peeling it back to a purpose-driven, then values, and then ensuring that everything you're doing is either value-based or going to give you something in return for you giving effort, I guess. Always thinking about that transaction rather than saying yes, being the yes man.
So you're thinking about that transaction on daily decisions?
Absolutely.
Like,
I think
for instance, like, you know, like it can be anything, like, hey, you know, skip rehab today and just come. The beach is pumping today. Like, let's just go. Let's go for a surf or something. It could be anything, right? But it's like, you know, you have to weigh up the pros and cons, and sometimes it might be like, I need a break from this right now. So this is the best decision, to go out and get some mental break or whatever it is. That could be the best decision, but oftentimes it's no, I've committed to this. I have to stay committed to this, right?
Yeah, you have to find enjoyment in the mundane, but also balance that with fresh, which is a weird kind of concept to think about, right? Like, you have to, like, I think the year before the Olympics, you really have to think about the mundane and just getting that getting the train moving. And then once the train's moving, thinking about when to hop off and take that breath and then getting back on. I think that's probably the analogy I'd use. And I do, yeah, like, I guess at the moment, we're probably in more a planning phase, probably for the next 2-3 weeks, as we're coming back, and conversations are happening all around between all different parts of the performance team. And for me, I'm kind of trying to take the responsibility on of collating that and having an understanding of what fits where, when, and what the priorities are. And from there, I can then make those daily decisions. So for me, it's all about, you know, having 3 areas in this, 3 areas in this, 3 areas in this, and 5 in the pool. That's kind of what I've boiled it down to, that's achievable. And then from there, working through those and ensuring there's those daily decisions to spend 10 minutes extra doing flexibility or XYZ, for example.
Right. Now, you just lost your world record. I'd imagine the goal was to go faster than the world record anyway. So it's not like, because someone went faster than what you did, then you're surprised by that. Like, I think you had already planned on going faster anyway. So it's like, now there's just someone ahead of you. Did it shift anything? Like, what kind of internal impact did that have, by somebody actually going out and breaking your world record?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I think it's like there's multiple aspects to it. I think, like, there's the mental side of it being like, now I'm pushed again, you know, like, it's no longer me there and me trying to push an edge. It's like, oh, there's a new edge already, so how can I go beyond that? And I think that's kind of a fun place to be, because I know that it's possible. Like, I know that, as you said, like, we'd always planned to go faster. So, like, it's not changing that. It just gives it, I guess, a bit of relief on myself. Like, that external pressure is kind of not as much there, if that makes sense. And then I think on top of that, it also, like, wakes up the people around you as well, like to go, okay, we can push. But also the third piece is that the way I'd explain it is like you look at 2066, 2061, and then 2059, and then here's 2054. They're 4 races that have swum 4 completely different ways. Like, and then you look at the American chap. Oh, what's his name? It's going to slip my mind now. I'm terrible with names.
Maybe Nick Fink or somebody.
Indiana swimmer, the guy that got he was third at World Champs, just behind me. God, it's terrible. But he's now swimming a 104 in his middle 100. So like he's the third guy to do that. So when you're looking at race breakdown, it's actually an interesting space because a lot of people have a room to move, and like that's a really exciting time for the two breasts, I think. And me personally, like I know that I've probably expended the back end. Like I know that, 104, 103, 103 mid is probably the top end of it, but that front end is where there's some exciting movement, I think.
Yeah, I was about to say, I mean, at some point you've got to look at this and say, well, I can't be 59 and expect to be, breaking the world record, by my top end speed, so I guess you're having some conversations with Cam McEvoy right now, are you?
Yeah. Well, Vince had some in-depth conversations with him at World Champs, which was nice to hear. He's taking on a fresh perspective, and there's a few people around who are listening to that as well, and Ryan, our biomech as well, and John Watson, new member of the team, has definitely taken the lead on how do we shift Zac's strength, not shift away from his strength or turn away from his strength, but maintain it whilst developing this other side and slightly shift some percentages of racing. So instead of 80-20, 80 on the back end, 20 on the front end, how do we shift it to a 60-40, 70-30, like, and then playing around with that of what could potentially work best for me.
How do you pronounce the world record holder's name?
I actually Qin.
Yeah, Qin Haiyang.
Yeah, lovely guy.
Is he? Yeah. Okay. He looked like a nice guy. Look, there's definitely talk. Well, there was talk before he came along that you couldn't possibly swim a fast 100 or 50, 100, 200, and he's gone out and won worlds in all 3. And I think he kind of shifted a paradigm of like you can have power and speed, but also endurance at the back end. I mean, he took that 200 out like he'd been training for it all year, like that was his one swim. And yet when you look at his 100 and his 50, was so dominant there as well. So it's like, are you struggling with this? Like, are you trying to figure this out? Like, how can you be so fast, but also have that endurance for a world record in a 200? Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yes and no. I mean, for me, it's not too surprising because I still believe there's a lot more in it in the two breast. And I know you probably then ask about times, but I probably won't say what I think is possible. But I think for me, like if we look at the 100 breast and look at trends of the women's two back and the other 200s in comparison to hundreds, especially like two fly, women's two back, and then we look at the men's 100 breast comparatively to the two breast, and we look at when Petey went 56, we're still going 206.
Yeah,
there's room, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I think like I know it's the least efficient stroke, but I think it only takes one to get over the line. It only takes one to actually show. And I think like Arno showed that there was the capacity to do it in Tokyo. Like first guy since Kijima to medal in both. Like, so he showed there's capacity to do it. And I think, so I don't think for me it was a massive shock. I think it was a shock potentially on the day that he, went out that fast and held on. I thought potentially, he wouldn't hold on, but lessons were learnt.
Well, in that race, where were you thinking that he was gonna let go of it? Like, were you surprised that he went out that hard, or were you expecting him to go out that strong?
I was expecting that strong based on his 100, and I think probably in that third 50, I thought he'd still have a lot of momentum coming off that 100 wall, but I thought potentially at that, 160, 165 mark, that's kind of where I start to change gears. And I think for me, I was actually like happy with my swim in the sense that I stayed composed, like I didn't get caught up in that. So for me, like I was kind of happy that there was some composure there, and yeah, I didn't expect that fast because that's how that's how he raced it 20 years ago. Like that's how Springer
Right.
broke the world record, right? Like,
Mm.
but just come back a lot faster, and that's the shift. But that's how the two breasts used to be raced. It was a very fast 100 followed by a solid back end, basically.
How hard is the 100 for you? How hard is that 59? Are you just not able to rate up, and so it's like a rhythm thing, or is it just you're not strong enough? Like, where's the disconnect in your 100? Like, why can't you go 58 low? I'm sure that's probably where your head's at now. You've got to get there, but like, how come you can't go 58 flat? Is it a rhythm? Is it just you can't get the timing right, or is it a strength thing, you think?
Both, if I'm honest. I think the one issue is the strength and ability to apply that strength at given rate, but then getting to that given rate. We've kind of done some interesting stuff in the pool here where we've done a bunch of kind of efficiency testing is the way
Mm,
I'd describe it. And with increasing rates and seeing where kind of the diminishing returns are. And for me at the moment, like 48 is like the sweet spot at that top end.
mm,
But like I know that potentially I need to be able to rate at 52, for example, to
right.
get there, but it's just not the right timing. It's not utilizing my strength, which is a kick, potentially not recovering quickly enough through the hamstring movement and those kind of things. So definitely like those conversations are happening. How do we get a higher stroke index over the
Mm.
next 10 months?
One of the things that people talked about with the current world record holder in the 200, they said that he'd put on a lot of muscle. He was a former
Mm.
200 breaststroker, but he'd got a lot of size. Are you? And Cam McEvoy's kind of gone that way. He's verbally said, openly said that he's put on, 10, 15 pounds of muscle or kilos maybe. You look like a lighter frame. Do you feel like you need to bulk up a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like for me, we look at Olympics and world record, like I was probably like 71 kilos at the Olympics and probably like 72, 73 when I broke the
Mm,
world record.
mm,
And realistically, I know that probably the lightest guy in the race is like at the Olympics was probably Chupkov at like 81. And the
mm.
and then like probably at Worlds was probably something similar, if not a little bit heavier. So like
Mm.
I'm at a disadvantage by maybe like 6 to 10 kilos.
Right, yeah.
Um, so like I know that
Which,
that's
for the Americans that are listening, it's probably about 20 pounds.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
a
just
significant amount of weight.
yeah, and I know that like it's a cost benefit as well for me. Like personally, I think for me personally, like I know that I have strength in being lean through that aerobic breaststroke.
Mhm.
But also the caveat to that is that there's not the same power through the front end and not able to gain that speed. So
Mm.
we've kind of gotten to the point where I flex that aerobic muscle enough that probably, well, definitely we need to put on some size. We need to get stronger generally, and then be able to apply it to specific swimming.
Yeah. Well, Cam did it in 9 months, and you're running out of time. The Olympics are not that far away, and then Olympic trials are even closer. So, is this? I wouldn't say like it's a panic button, but have you gone in and said like we need a completely new plan here, and let's get it down pat before we get going? Like, are you feeling good with where you're at right now with the plan going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited for this next little bit, and like I think there is a lot of room to move. Like that, you can make changes in 10, 11 months. Obviously, you only really have 10 months, and then that month is resting for trials and resting for the Olympics. So there's definitely room to move, and the back end of this year is really, really important that I get nutrition and the gym stuff right. And purposely, like we didn't have a break from the gym. We had about a week off once we got back from Worlds, and then jumped straight in the gym, and only kind of gotten in the water last week and building now in the pool. But we had that 4-week block of, solid gym, and definitely felt stronger even from that small block. So I know my body responds well to any load that it's given. So I'm excited, I guess. And I know that it will take a lot of obsession and attentiveness to that aspect. But I'm excited for it, and I'm excited for that challenge.
What do you think the difference will look like in programming? So, like, compared to what you were doing before, in terms of the amount of gym and the time spent in the gym, what would be the difference for you? So, like, let's say, previously you're in there 2 times a week for 45 minutes, something like that, and now your plan is to go 3 times a week for an hour and a half or something. Like, what's the difference in the plans, you think?
Quite similar to what you just said. I mean, for me, the last 4 weeks have basically been 4 to 5 gym sessions a week, averaging an hour and a half to 2 hours in the gym, and that's a lot of the time is resting, but you are lifting a bit heavier, doing some functional movement stuff. Also trying to do some ATP activation, just trying to build like actually waking up that energy system, because for me it's an underutilized system. Like, in the pool, the highest lactate I've ever got is like 12ish, and like and that was after like a whole heap
That's a
of
shame, man.
hundreds
Wait
and
till you taste
50s.
20.
So yeah, like we're just trying to do some stuff on inefficiencies. So for me, my strength is length and efficiency in breaststroke. So we can't necessarily chase that lactate and those kind of things in that. So we have to try and have solutions around that. And one of those solutions, sadly, is the assault bike, and that's been brutal the last couple of weeks.
What do you do on the assault bike? How do you hit it?
We've been going for time efforts, and then with recovery in between, and then getting a lactate at the end, which has been quite interesting. Like for short bursts of time, you get a lot of like response.
So I imagine your strength has been your capacity for volume of work, but not so much the intensity. Maybe so like, is that going to be something new for you, like building in that top end intensity? Is it?
Yeah. And I think potentially we'll, for the rest of the year at least, and probably into the beginning of next year, there won't be as many Ks. Like for me, we probably, for the last, since I've been with Vince, so nearly 7 years, we've averaged like 60K a week. But I know I probably swim better around 50 to 55. And I know that potentially like we can do more aerobic freestyle, which doesn't deplete kind of the high end breaststroke. So I think, well, I know there's conversations happening around how do we keep doing that, and how do we structure the week a little bit differently to have those top ends and enough recovery before that top end speed, but still maintaining that aerobic base with the freestyle supplementation almost. So that's kind of the perspective we're taking into the next few months, and trying to build that anaerobic capacity. And then on top of that, there's a lot of racing in October, November, and December. So racing like a bunch of Queensland prep meets, and then into Japan Open, and then into Queensland States. So that's another form of stimulus in that anaerobic high-end racing phase. And we found that, pre-Tokyo, that's probably what we didn't do in the last 2 years. Before the Olympics, it was like, and before trials, like we hit some very quick 200s consecutively month after month, we
Mhm.
in heavy training. So for me, that's a big one, a confidence boost, but also showing the system's actually taking on the load and we're doing everything around the pool right. Because at the end of the day, like, we can talk about the plan, we can talk about doing this, this, and this, but if you're not doing outside of the pool correctly, it doesn't work. Like, if you're not fueling correctly, if you're not getting enough sleep, if you're not actually resting, if you're go, 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 like I have been in the past and definitely fallen into that trap,
Mhm.
that it doesn't work. Like, you can't, yeah. And that comes back to this whole idea of like going big on the things you want to go big on.
Mm. What have you been doing out of the pool the last couple of years? Are you the type of person that needs that stimulus outside to kind of balance the inside the pool, or are you like locked into the pool where you just when you get out of the pool, it's like completely just recovery based? What's been your approach?
The last 3 years have been mixed. Probably like when I've swum my best, I have a lot of things going on outside of the pool, like uni and work. At the
What do you
present, it's
mean
probably
union work?
more.
Tell me about union work.
So I'm studying a Bachelor of Business, or at that time was Bachelor of Business and Psychology. Dropped the psych at the moment just to focus on swimming, and I'll
Uh-huh.
just complete a Bachelor of Business in Human Resource Management and Behavioural Science
Okay.
majors. And then I've done a bit of work. I was doing some work for the Olympic Committee before the Olympics, in their community engagement. So bringing our athletes a program called Olympics Unleashed. So helped bring Olympians out into schools across Queensland. And like, I was talking to my old boss the other day, and he said that I think they reached about 2,500 schools nationwide,
Wow.
over like the last 4 years. So like, I think there's only 2,200 schools in the country. So like, they've already reached like nearly all the schools at least once, and they're already going to second visits. So it's quite a rewarding program. And then after the Olympics, got the opportunity to do some executive coaching, in that space, which is kind of the space I want to move into after swimming. So, you know, I have quite a passion for high performance and a passion to see people get the best out of themselves and reach their potential or exceed what they believe is possible. And for me, that happens through performance planning, performance processes, and then maintenance of review. And I see a cool kind of space developing with, the technology we're seeing with artificial intelligence and all those kind of
Mhm.
things, to actually analyze talent gaps more quickly and be able to quickly analyze and have a lot more data. So there's a cool space kind of happening, I think, and that executive coaching kind of fits into that, where I would like to go after swimming. But yeah, like, I'm close-ish to finishing uni, so just trying to gain some experience outside of the pool. We call it like, one of my mentors said, let's call it experience without expectation. So you can come in, but if you need to drop everything, you're more than welcome. We understand that swimming is the priority. So I really like, those kind of people, and that's an attitude I've kind of gone in with in the
Mm.
last probably 6 to 12 months, that it's experience without expectation.
It sounds like you don't just identify as a swimmer though. Like you know, you see life after this, but you also see life within this too of yeah, like it's great that I swim, but studying's important to me. And then I don't imagine that you worked for the money. You didn't really need the money at that point in time. It was more just for the experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's also been baked into me, that swimming's not forever. I think, you know, if you're lucky, you make it to 28. Like,
Mm.
that's, for me, that's four and a touch years away. It's like,
Mm.
that's soon. And I think for
No
me,
Brisbane?
no. I'll be too old and probably broken by then, in the stroke I swim. But it's like, I've always taken the person first approach. Even when I was at school, I always wanted to give back and ensure that I was doing, not necessarily not missing out on experiences, but ensuring I was getting enough experience outside of the pool. So for me at school, that meant like ensuring I was doing a lot of service activities. So that meant like I did the Ride to Conquer Cancer, always did the door knock appeal, and a few other bits and pieces. So for me, that community piece has always been really important, and a person first approach. And ultimately, it means staying true to who you are and your values. And I think it makes you. It's probably after that 2018 experience we spoke about earlier, being like, you have to take a slight step back and go like, well, why am I doing this? Is it like because I'm good at it? And that's probably not enough. Like it's a lot of the time it's because you want to find your edge. For me, you want to be the best version of you can be, and this is purely an outlet for that. And ultimately, like I could have fallen into another sport or another pursuit and found that edge somewhere else. But at the moment, my pursuit of excellence, my pursuit of perfection, whatever you want to call it, is in the chosen field or chosen sphere of swimming. And that ultimately comes back to the person and then goes out into exploring yourself in that sense.
Yeah. I like it. I like it a lot. I'm just sitting here thinking about the success that you've had, and it's quite extraordinary. Like I've known many friends of mine that have become world record holders. I've been around people of excellence all my life as well, pretty much ever since I made my first Australian team at 20. I've met people who've gone on to break world records, and that was never my destiny. I was never destined to be the best in history. You were, and you have been. It's pretty extraordinary, and it's not for everybody. It's for the very few. I talk about knowing a lot of people. I'm talking about very few people, but like I know people who've been world record holders, and so I don't even know what my question is really, but the idea behind it is like, once you become that extraordinary, how then do you set the next goal of like, I'm the best in history. What's after that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess. But that for me, that's been an interesting one. I think even after the Olympics, it was like that was the dream and that was the edge. And for me, it was like you realize about the whole Olympic come down. You realize like it's well and truly a real thing. And like it was an interesting one because it was like, what's next, and then kind of redefining a purpose.
Right.
And that for me was relentless pursuit of a process rather than an outcome. And for me, that's probably why I've had satisfaction and been able to maintain like my performance for the last few years. Because I don't think without that purpose, if I was just floating through, it wouldn't have happened. So for me, that still remains the drive and the edge is that purpose. And it is an interesting one because I think everyone finds that at different points and everyone has a different purpose, but ultimately like that's what's driving them. Like, yeah, it is an interesting one. And I think I've spoken to Mel and Adam a bit about it when I got to train with them at the start of the year. And Mel and I had a brief conversation at World Champs about it and said like, the interesting piece is the higher you climb the ladder, the less people understand. And that's such a like profound thing. And it's like lots of people talk about this whole like once you get to the 1% of the 1%, like less people understand. But I think both of us have been lucky in that sense that there's people around that you can talk to about those things that like you never dreamed were going to happen. Like you believed maybe it could happen, and then when it does happen, it's a bit of a holy shit moment. Like, did that just happen? And then the after bit is where those people, you really find comfort in those friends and family around you, really. And like for me, the person that's probably been really good is like Mac. Like I cannot attest enough. Is like I roomed with him in Tokyo and said to him like, "What do you wish you did better?" And like he said, "I wish I remembered more." And it like sparked me to like write journals. And then now I have this like book at home just full of like my Olympic experience. And then like he was the first person to come up to me after I broke the world record and took a whole heap of photos of me. And like, there's these photos on my like wall at home, like that he took of like the half an hour after I'd done media and everything, where I'm warming down for the next day. It's like, it's really like you work out who those people are that you bounce ideas off. And I think they're the most important people you work out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting when you break a world record. Us as people looking at it from the outside, looking into what you've just accomplished, all we see really is the strengths. Like I remember friends of mine breaking world records, and you think to yourself, "Wow, I've never seen anything that good. I've never seen anything like that." I haven't specifically seen your world record. But I remember thinking to myself when you were at the World Championships a few months ago and you got beaten at 200, I remember thinking to myself, wow, all of his weaknesses just got exposed. Like when you break a world record, all of your strengths get exposed. And when you get beaten, your weaknesses get exposed because somebody does something better than you just did, right? And you think to yourself, wow, like I am human again. Like I do have things I've got to improve. So did you have kind of that rush? And it would be interesting if Mac was there maybe after you just got beaten and he took all those photos, so you could have your photos after your world record and then your photos after you got beat. That'd be interesting to look at. But in terms of like if there was a camera there and it was to expose, the differences between those two experiences, what do you think they would highlight?
Yeah, as you just said, I think it is the strengths, the weaknesses. I think when you do break a world record, even like the people around you, unless we're really level-headed, like go like, "Oh, that was amazing." And like the first question I got asked after I broke the world record was like, "Oh, can you swim faster?" I was like, I was like, "Oh, come on, give me a break." But like, if I didn't think I could swim faster, I wouldn't still be here.
Right.
If that makes sense. Like I wouldn't keep swimming. If I thought I hit a perfect race, that's it. Like I'm done. Like, but yeah, like, so, I mean, and then in contrast, you definitely feel your weaknesses. You feel like you go from, like, it's cliche, but you go from the hunted to the hunter.
Yeah.
And for me, like, that's refreshing. Because for me, like, I don't like the spotlight. I don't like that. I like being my own person and just chugging along at my own pace. So for me, it's exciting in the sense that, we can compare completely different race plans and completely different strengths and weaknesses and kind of move towards something in between. And that's, but I totally agree. Like you definitely get shown and exposed your weaknesses. But it doesn't necessarily mean you sacrifice your strengths is probably what I would say to that.
Right. Yeah. So I'm looking at the splits, and your best swims under 206 have been when you come back in under 32, right? So like you're 31.6 on the back end basically, but you're out in 24 mid, and then you hold 32 mids kind of thing, and then you're back in 31 mid, let's say. So like when you're looking at the splits, where are you looking? You're not looking at this and saying, well, I got to come back in 31 flat to win it. It's like, but I'm 29, 32, 32, 31 flat. Are you thinking like maybe I've got to be out in 28, or maybe I've got to be pushing 31s in the middle 100? Like, what are you looking at?
Yeah, it's the middle 100 in combination with that first 50. So I guess the first 50, how can you get the greatest efficiency with the fastest speed possible is the way I'd describe it. So for me, like the best person I've ever seen do that is Chupkoff. Like 11 strokes when he broke the world record is like, it looks like he's doing drill. I've never seen someone with such length and composure ever to this day. Like it's incredible.
And what did he split on the first 50?
I think it was 8, 9 maybe.
Okay. So you're thinking like I got to be, high eights.
Yeah, high eights I think would be comfortable. And then I think that middle 100, I think the best middle 100 I've ever been is like 4.5, 4.8. So for me, like, how do you? The question is like, how do you get down to 4 low or under? So, and that can happen a number of ways. It can happen through that second 50. It can happen through the third 50. But how do you shift that whilst maintaining 31.5? That's the puzzle, and that's the challenge, right? Like, so for me, it's that focus, that middle 100, which means the training shifts a little bit more to how do you develop speed and then pull the efficiency down, and then how do you develop lactate tolerance in that middle 100, and like that's ultimately what it is.
How much has lactate tolerance played a part in your preparation in the past? Like, if you were to say, you know, how often did you do it, and how important was it to you in terms of focus? Like, what would you say?
It's definitely been quite a large focus. I think like that threshold level breaststroke has been a big focus, but I think where the piece has been missing is like actually being able to produce higher lactates and then tolerate, 10 plus. For me, is probably a good place to be, because probably what's happened in the past is we think we're there, but we're actually at 6. So we're actually just tolerating, aerobic, high-end aerobic level breaststroke.
Right.
So for me, that's the shift. It's like we went to second gear without going through first, I guess is the way I'd put it.
So what did that look like for you when you were doing sets like that? What were those sets? What did they look like?
I mean, a tolerance set would probably be like, we have a 1350 set where it's like 1 dive, max effort 50, followed by 3 rounds of 450s, and like ascending rest. So 130 first round, 145, and then 2 minutes, all out max effort, things like that. We've done 650s on 3 minutes, Simon Cusack's 950s, which is like descending rest. Those kind of things where you're building lactate and then moving into tolerance.
So when you're doing that, let's go back to was it 650s on 3 minutes? Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
What are you holding when you do that?
Our best ever was pre-com games, and that was 29 fours push in a
29
suit.
fours push. So what do you think the shift would be then? If that's what you're already doing, but you know that you've got to push the lactate tolerance, are you just saying to yourself, I can do the same set and hold 28s, or are you just saying I need to come up with new sets?
Both. I think like potentially to invoke that lactate, potentially we need to explore freestyle, like as an inefficiency, because I believe that like I've gotten to the point where breaststroke is efficient enough that like my body goes, no, like you can do this all day, like don't worry about it, kind of thing.
I've heard that about you, actually. I've heard that you can just go all day on breaststroke.
So for me, like I know that potentially, I think there could be 2 options. We explore assault bike pre-50s effort for tolerance. So just abusing yourself on the assault bike into some 50s dive, 35s dive effort, or 50s freestyle dive effort into 200 pace breaststroke, just trying to like maintain, like just absolutely deplete that energy system and then try and hold on, basically.
Hold those
Because like,
31s or something.
yeah, because for me, like I did a session with Mel where like I was like did 2450s under my 200 pace, and I was like it hurt me, but it wasn't until like 16, 17 that it really started to burn and bite, and I still got through all 24. So like for me, it was like that's kind of like shows that we've reached the limit currently at that system, and we need to build strength and the system of like that 15 to 35 meters, and then come back to that.
Do you ever do resistance breaststroke at speed?
Not at pace. It's definitely something my gym coach and I have had early discussions about, because I think we both think it could be valuable, and speaking to Cam a bit about it, like the logic behind it, I'm like, why is no one doing this? Like, like just when he simply puts it as like, if you could do 10 chin-ups at 10 kilos, like how many could you do it? Like how easy would body weight be then? Like, so that pure like one sentence logic, it just like all kind of clicks when you start to think about resistance being like, if you can do that with that, then how like your body can now hold X water at the same rate.
So previously you were just doing resistance at length. Is that what you were doing?
Yeah, just to find rhythm and dead spots and those kind of things. But now we're kind of emphasizing a little bit more power breaststroke on that resisted.
Right. Do you believe in dolphin kick breaststroke? Do you ever do dolphin kick breaststroke?
Yeah, we do a fair bit of pull, partly for rhythm and also partly to protect groins. So definitely early season, we do a lot of that. And then I think for me, something that, as we talk about inefficiency, the limiting factor for me a lot of the time in rate is kick, because like I won't start my next stroke unless my feet are finished. And that's for me like the golden rule of breaststroke, like one of the golden rules. So, and in saying that, like I know that when I've gone really hard, like I know 100 dive fins breaststroke is like, that's written on the board. I'm like, oh, like this sucks, because it is so much harder than 100 breaststroke. Like it's shorter in time wise, but the energy system and the energy expenditure required to get at that higher rate, to be at that like uncomfortable zone, is like a lot harder, and something I think potentially we can explore more of after, like not after, but in the coming weeks and months.
Have you thought about changing your kick? So in terms of not loading up as high. So maybe I imagine in your breaststroke you pull back and you're capturing water, like you catch everything and you finish. Have you thought about like shortening it here and just getting into it quicker?
Yeah, definitely. We've definitely thought about it and explored it, and like probably not to the extent we need to. I think we've always been like reluctant to play with the strength, but I think there needs to be some shift to be able to apply that power and do those higher rate, higher lactate speed sessions. And I think ultimately, like we have to find a happy balance between potentially not changing the kick in the middle of a 200, but having a 200 kick, having a 100 kick is probably where it will land. So yeah, definitely.
Do you train breaststroke kick as an isolated movement? And if you do, how do you do it? Do you use a board? Do you use a snorkel? No board? Arms by your side, arms out in front. How do you do your breaststroke kick?
Mixed. I mean, for me, we do a lot. Majority of the kick on the board. I
Okay.
definitely early season. So at the moment, definitely do probably like 50, or like let's say 75% breaststroke kick, 25% fly kick, just to protect those knees and hips and groins. That's definitely early season what I'll do. And as we progress, definitely do more kick on the board. But I like kick but with arms by side as a drill more than actually kick, to get that breath timing with head and heel timing, as like your learn to swim teacher probably talked about. But it's something I still do and still believe in, that head and heel timing is really important. And then definitely kick on back for knee, to like have a check of hips and knees to ensure that like body line's really, really strong, and really like as flat as you can get it. And then kick on front, I'll occasionally do as well. Did a bit more with Mel with some paddle work. So paddles in front, kind of feeling where the dead spot in the kick is. So just adding that little bit of resistance, to feel where that pause is. So to seeing where, as you spoke about, like where do you actually shorten that kick? Like where are you stopping? So yeah, like definitely do a range of different kick styles, but it's predominantly on the board. Like I can almost guarantee we'll have at least between 6 and 8 ones kick like every session, guaranteed.
Now,
So
are you kicking for count there? Like when you're on a board and you're holding hundreds, are you saying I'm going to be, 25 kicks down, 25 kicks back, or anything like that?
No, we have never done that with Vince. I've done that like as an age grouper a long time ago. We used to call it kick golf. So you tried to get lowest count possible with the fastest time.
Right.
So definitely did that along like this. I'm talking 2015, 2014, but not anymore. It's more time based and those kind of things.
What's your best 100 kick on a board for time?
Probably a 15 or a 16, and then
that's slick.
50. I'm hopeless, like 38. And then 200, 200. I'm like, as we get longer, I get better. So
yeah, I imagine as you go up, you're getting better and better. But you got to shift that mindset now.
Oh, absolutely. Like I know my 400 kick. Like
yeah,
my 400 kick, I think is like 5:38. So like we're not talking much slower than the 100 pace. Like. Which is kind of I know I need to shift that other end, and that's what I keep talking about. It's like muscle I need to flex of like stop flexing the 400 speed and the more the 100 speed.
So where I guess your weakness, if you're looking at upper and lower body, is more towards the upper body. Is that where you're not as strong and powerful? Like I imagine you have a pretty efficient, powerful kick, but upper body wise, you feel like you've got some gains to make there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like that was probably the biggest shift when I came to Vince was definitely a lot more breaststroke pull. We still do a lot of pull. It definitely just supplements everything, but yeah, definitely like upper body strength, like especially like I've never really gotten after bench press or bench pull in the gym. Like it's always been kind of supplementary. Like it was always been like legs for like chase your legs strength. And now it's like my gym coach is like, yeah, we can get after bench. Like let's see what you can get on the bar. And it's like, it's kind of sad when I go into the gym sometimes and like the girls like maxing out and I'm like, oh God, like that's close to what I'm lifting. So yeah, like it's definitely something we're chasing strength and power, but also like ensuring that we can apply it to the stroke and it's stroke specific.
So you think like, are we going to get a shock in like 10 months? You're going to rip your shirt off at trials and everyone's going to be like, oh my God, are you just going to be a jacked up version?
Yeah. Maybe I'll just hide out for 10 months and just come out.
Just go to the mountains, just come out. Come out like Quinn. That's what Quinn did, didn't he? It was like everyone was like, oh my God, look at the size of this kid now.
Yeah, something like that.
Do you have any doubts? Like, I know that in the past there's been certain teams that have had clouds over them, and you see a guy like that come out and do that. You have any doubts at all, or is that doesn't even cross your mind?
I mean, like everyone can talk about like China's history and all those kind of things, but I think for me it's like innocent until proven guilty. Like I mean, he's had performances as an age grouper, he's had performances as a junior, all the way through and short course, etc. So for me, like it all seems fairly legit. I think Mac would probably say something slightly different, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but obviously given his history, he has a different bias and those kind of things. And I think everyone's got their own unique experience. And for me, like there's nothing probably more to say really, apart from like I still believe the guy, and it's cool for the sport, and it's cool to see him progress, and it's cool to see someone do what everyone thought was impossible and go all through.
Yeah. We don't need to say more than that. I agree with that too. I feel the same way. But what's going on with Australian breaststroke? Why are you 5 seconds ahead of the next best person in Australia?
I think it's an interesting one. Like it's, I guess, like if you look at the history of breaststroke in Australia, like we had Christian Brenton for so long, and before that we had like a couple of others, and then kind of like Matt and I kind of were the young guys as they were coming through, as they were finishing. like quite young, and then like we had a few other guys that probably were really capable of getting there but didn't quite get let in. If that kind of makes sense. I think like that's like they never kind of pushed through, and it could be more a reflection of the development of the sport. But I think it is quite interesting. Like Matt and I came from the same age group, raced each other the whole way through. But then you had like Buster Sykes, Josh Tierney, Jared Gilliland, Nick Pregrell, and like they were all like 211, 210 swimmers, but they were just behind Brenton and Christian. So like for me, it was like they never quite held on long enough and never were looked after just long enough to have this depth in the sport of like, you know, 24-year-olds trying to make the team. Like when males are peaking, like we have like that young guy, they're like 16, they're like 18 and 20-year-olds. They're not like at their peak yet, which is exciting, like for the sport, but disappointing that the sport can't hold on to all of the 24-year-olds.
I was going to talk about your tattoo. You have a pretty cool tattoo. Is it at the front of your shin? Is that where it is?
Yeah, I have a koi fish on my foot. I have a butterfly with a skull in the middle of it as like its pattern, so you can't see it unless you like stand back a couple of steps. And then I have a tiger and a dragon and then a couple of other bits and pieces on my arms. A smattering of things.
But what interests me, like I'm into MMA, and like the kickboxers tend to have tattoos on their shins. That just seems to be like their weapon, and they weaponize it. Like, is that what you went for? Like, is that your weapon?
I mean, no, I think like I just had my legs, and like we all know the stigma that sometimes come with tattoos, especially for employment afterwards. And like I didn't want too much visible stuff as well, so that's probably why I did it. But the butterfly was like new beginnings, and like, you know, you have to be reminded of to live, because I have on my wrist as well, I have memento mori, memento vivere, which means like remember you die and remember you live. So it's something I try and live by every day. It's like if I was, you know, to die tomorrow, I would be happy with what I'm doing and what I've done today. And it's just like it comes back to that like daily decision of like pushing yourselves and like not regretting anything you've ever done.
So what gets under your skin then now? Like other than just you want to be your best, what really pisses you off?
I think obviously I guess my weakness is in that sense that like I'll sometimes get caught up in things not going my way or things not flowing the way I think they should be flowing. And sometimes, and I think this season I've definitely got caught up in, there's been a lot of change in our program. I think Vince has struggled personally with the leadership of that, the leadership of how to navigate that change. And for me, that's been quite frustrating to just be like sitting there bystanding. And that's part of the reason I probably like really taken on board and taken a lot of initiative this season to be like, no, like this can't happen again. So that's probably what irks me the most, and probably then buying into that too much and letting that like into my head and kind of creating too much noise and not being able to focus on like, okay, we have to do this dive 50 now. I'm just being frustrated. So like things like that, I think, is the weakness when it's like the frustration of the flow of it. And like ultimately that comes back to me and like a reflection of me. I know that like I'm not going to change those people. So it's like, how do I come up with solutions myself to be better, I guess, in that sense.
So what I take from that is that you're at a point now where you have maybe a lot more say in the program and in how you're doing things. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. I think Vince obviously has the final say, but I think he listens probably a lot more than 7 years ago when I was an athlete coming in. And I think it's much more of a partnership. And like, I think initially when I first joined, there's a lot of people trying to put their influence on me and like being like, oh, you got to try this, you got to do this, blah, blah, blah. And he was often the gatekeeper. Whereas now it's kind of almost like I'm on the other side, ensuring I get everything I need and ensuring I'm hearing everything. And now I'm able to diffuse and be like, as I said to you before, like ask the question, is this going to make the boat go faster? Like,
Yeah.
ultimately that's what it's about. And like, ultimately, like if I've learned anything in high performance, a lot of the time, like you aim for 100 and you get 95% there and it's pretty fucking close, like to what you
Mm.
hoped for.
Mm.
And because like, yeah, like you're on the pursuit of perfection, but you have to understand that it's more likely than not that that perfection will never happen. It's as simple as that. There's too many external factors that happen around it, and ensuring that you understand that and you take control of your controllables is really important.
Does it matter to you to become a two-time Olympic champion? Like when you set out to become an Olympic champion, you have this hope and this dream, to become this Olympic champion, to get your first Olympic gold in your set event. Like, is it now something that you've been visualizing and dreaming about to become a two-time Olympic champion?
I definitely believe it's possible, and I definitely like think that it's a rare air to have back to back, and it's also rarer air to even have the opportunity to do it.
Mm.
So for me, whatever happens next year, like I'll be happy just being in an Olympic final, but also like I know that I will give everything I can before next year. And I said this like just before trials, like at an Olympic event that I went to, and said like they asked about that, and I said like they said, what does the next year look for you? And I said, look, the next year for me looks pretty like dull. Like it's you're all in, like you're obsessive. There'll be like shit times, there'll be dark times where you're questioning everything. You
Mm.
become like a hermit and you become obsessive about it. And I can like guarantee I will give my best to next year, and that's all you can do.
Yeah. No, I agree, man. I like that. I believe it. In saying that, there was a time where you capitalize on that chance you had, right? So you do go out and you ultimately win this gold medal, which is the elusive thing. Like we all have these dreams, and now you're kind of back to that square one again. So like the lessons you learn from actually executing that dream and putting it all together and actually going out and making it happen. What have you learned from that you could take into this part two that you could repeat?
Um, yeah, there's a lot of learnings. I mean, for me, there was a lot of habits that we had, like touching base with Vince every day, like ensuring we were both having really good communication was probably the biggest thing and the biggest change that we had. And I think
Well, I
then,
mean, like I'm even going deeper than that. Like I'm thinking like on race day, you know, well, I remember being in an Olympic final, right? Like I
mhm,
remember thinking to myself, hey, in 45 minutes from now, someone's going to be Olympic champion, right? Like, and I remember the processes and the emotions and the actions that I took in that 45 minutes to try and make that me, right? Like
mm,
I wanted that for me, and then looking back, I saw in that time just little mistakes that I made, whereas you didn't do that. Like you may have made some small mistakes, but most of the things you did ended up being very a net positive for you. Like you
mm,
actually went out and won the Olympic gold. So like in that smaller, shorter, defining moment when all the pressure is on and you don't know if you can do it and you've got to pull out your best, right? Like in that moment in the Olympic final, you've got to do something you feel like you've never done before. Like you've got to be better than you've ever been, right?
yeah,
So you did that. And so like how do you then replicate that into another moment like that, you know?
yeah, that is an interesting one because I guess never really been posed that question before. So like, yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you.
I try and
I
think
mean, like,
deeper.
yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, for me, the things that I would replicate was like the last thing I thought about before I stepped on a block was like I looked down the pool and I could see the podium and I could see the Olympic rings. And I said, like, I can remember the thought being like, how fucking cool is this? Like, this is the Olympic final. Like,
Yes.
that's it. And it's an
Yes.
enjoyment factor almost for me. I know that when I'm enjoying myself, when I'm
Right.
still, is probably the way I'd describe it, is when I swim my best. And like having no expectation is also a key to that. And
Yes.
understanding where you're at. And that's an interesting one now because there is an expectation when it gets to the Olympics again. Like,
Well, see, that's it. That's the mistake I made that you didn't make. We're in the same position, right? We're looking down the pool, and I'm thinking to myself, "Hey, when I get to the other end, I could be Olympic champion." Like I'm thinking about being Olympic champion before, and you're the opposite. You're like you eliminated those thoughts, and you were just still, and you didn't allow yourself to think beyond. You just stayed right in the moment, which is the learning, right? Which is then why you were then able to go out and execute exactly the way you wanted to, whereas I was forcing everything because I had this preconceived expectation of I'm going to become Olympic champion, so this is how I've got to get it. I've got to force it, right? And you didn't do that.
Yeah. But at the same time, like when I watched Jack's 400 free final, Jack McLaughlin, who was like training partner at the time, I remember watching his race and him getting silver and being like, I fucking want that. Like I was so fired up, and I was like, okay, like, and this was like 4 days before I raced. So I was like, okay, I have to take a step back. Like I need to focus on what I
Yeah.
can control. So
Yeah. Oh, look,
in the same
that's
token,
normal.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure, it's normal. But like, I guess I'm saying that like I definitely can see those like hooks, I guess we'd call them, like
Right.
psychological hooks of being like, how do we ensure that we notice the hooks but not buy into the hooks is
Right.
the
Right.
idea of it. And yeah, like for me, that was the strangest thing because I've only had that feeling twice, and that was at the Olympics and when I broke the world record. Like it's stillness, composure, enjoyment, and excitement because it's like that it's this weird feeling, like you feel like something special is going to happen and you'll be content with whatever the result is. Like you are content within yourself, so therefore you're content with everything that's about to transpire, is the way
Man,
I describe it.
I hope you circled those in the journal. Did you?
Yeah. There's a photo where it's like Delhi took it and it's like right before it's in the journal, it's like right before I stood on the block. And like I can pinpoint the feeling I had like then. And
Yes.
like
Yes.
the strangest thing is like you talk about forcing it. And like I've said this to a couple of people. I remember looking at Chukov and seeing him going, like his eyes, he was like panicked. You could see it was the last thing on his bucket list. It was the last thing he wanted to get.
Yep.
But you could see the force, like you could see that energy, and you knew.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same as Matt at trials. Like I could see he was struggling. Like you can see it when, and it's a weird thing. Like
Yeah.
you don't know it until you see it. But when you see it,
Right.
you're like, that's exactly what it is. Like you can see
Right.
it. So for me, like I can see when and know when I've also gotten into those states. So yeah, like I guess for me, it's about staying composed, enjoying it, and enjoying it like I did at Worlds. Like Worlds for me was like really fun. Like I enjoyed myself and thoroughly. Like especially the heat and the semi. Like I thoroughly enjoyed myself, and I'm like very privileged to be able to do that at world stage racing, world
Yeah.
class races. Like to be able to enjoy the racing and have fun with it. But ultimately, like that's part of what it's about, right? Like you can't deny, like we're there, and we're not going to die. Like it's not like UFC fighting or anything like that where it
Yeah.
potentially could be life threatening. We're there to go a lap, 2 laps, whatever you want to call it, however many laps you're going to swim. Like that's what it's about. Like it's about testing yourself and enjoying that moment. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. And I think
has
sometimes
been.
we put too much weight on it. Like, we see millionaires and we think, oh, I'd be so much happier if I was a millionaire. And then we see Olympic champions. We're like, I'd be so much happier if I was an Olympic champion. And it's like, it doesn't really have that type of impact on your life, does it?
No. I think like obviously, I think the thing it changed for me was you realize that capable of things you didn't believe in. This is the weirdest thing. Like, you obviously believe it in those moments, but you don't always believe it along the way, is the way I describe it. Like,
Sure.
so you prove to yourself that something is possible. Like, a goal that you put out on paper that happened, that you seemed, a lot of the time seemed completely unattainable.
Right.
You got there. And that's, to me, like, and like, the weirdest thing is, like, I don't even remember it, but like, Emma saw me after I raced, and she hadn't raced much yet. I don't think she'd won an individual gold yet, and we were on the bus back together, and she goes, "How's it feel?" And I said, "It doesn't change anything." Like, she's told me this after, but I don't remember saying this. But apparently, I said to her, like, it doesn't change who you are. Like, you're still the same person as I was yesterday. I just have a gold medal. Like, it doesn't change anything. That you're still the same person. You still have the same values. It was just a weird moment that she says it to me often. She's like, "Oh yeah, like, do you remember when you said this to me? Like, that changed my mindset about it." I was like, cool, but like, I don't remember it.
You're just numb at that point.
yeah. Talk about emotional high. It was wild.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. So you think if you at this stage you're thinking then LA would be it, so like 5 years from now. But just before that, I mean, Paris a year from now, Paris is going to be pretty special. I mean, I imagine an Olympics in Paris is going to be something extraordinary.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, when we were there for Com Games last year in our staging camp, like, they'd already started setting things up, and I think, like, the Rugby World Cup happens. For all the Americans listening, the Rugby World Cup happens in October in France. So that will be kind of a cool to see what it's all about. But you see, like, massive sporting events happen all the time in Paris, and the Olympics is a whole nother level. So it'll be very, very cool to see. And like we're already seeing, especially in swimming, like, the French team really taking off, and it's really, really, really cool to see.
Oh yeah, here we are. We've been talking for an hour and 17 minutes. I haven't even brought up the Frenchman and all the talk around his 200 breast. So a lot of people are already kind of just putting the gold medal around his neck if he wants to swim it. What's your thoughts on Leon?
Yeah, I think, like, he's definitely a capable breaststroker, and 6'6" is nothing to it's really solid. I think, like, potentially he relies a lot on one speed and holding that speed the whole way, as a 400 swimmer, really. And ultimately, I think the way we saw the Chinese swim, the 2054, he's going to have to shift something if he wants to focus on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So for me, yeah, like, he's dangerous and capable, but there's other people I'm also like, I know that, like, for example, like Arno and Casper. Casper's just moved back to the Netherlands and training with Arno now. So, like, Casper's like 6'6" and, like, has a really low stroke count and really nice easy breaststroke. And like, I'm like, is anyone watching this bloke? Like, like, I'm there also going, like, there's 5 other guys that are more than capable of getting up still as well.
Yeah. Good point. It'll be interesting if he does decide to put it in his program. I mean, I know that it didn't match up at the World Championships, but I think it may open up better for him at the Olympics. So we'll see what he decides in terms of his programming, but definitely putting a lot on his plate. Is the 100 something you want to get so good at that you potentially see yourself in the Olympic final?
I mean, that would be very cool. I think, like, I'd love to be good enough to be, I guess, world class, which is top 8, the definition of our world class in Australia. So definitely, for sure, close to there, I think, would be in the ballpark of where we're thinking. I think, like, the fastest Australian is 58.58. I think it is. Yeah, 58.58 is Brenton or Christian. Christian would be. A little while ago now, I think, when he was silver at the Olympics, would be close to that. So
Yeah.
like for me, that's probably where we're looking. Would be nice to get there, and I think 58.58 may take more than the next little bit, but I think it's definitely capable. I'm definitely capable of getting there. It's just ensuring we have the right processes and the right plan to get there, I guess, and something that I believe in as well is a big part of it.
Have you always gone to meets and swum the 100 and 200, or is it a situation where you'll add more 50s and 100s to your programs in the lead up to trials?
Yeah, definitely add more 50s and 100s and value them a bit more. Like I think often when I'll nominate for a 50 breast or 100 breasts, the 50 is especially, it's just like I'm not taking it super seriously, but I think I need to shift that mindset and more, yeah, like think about those 50 breasts and 100 breasts and have a bit more strategy, especially around that 100 breasts. Like I know at trials, like I still to this day like go in and like even though I'm the fastest on paper, I'm like going and going. Like half the time, I'm like, how the fuck do I do this? Like, like I know that I'll be behind at the first 50 and kind of just go, okay, I'll catch them. But like, I know that one day I won't. Like, I know that if Sam put together a good race, like
Mm,
he would, like he would destroy me like completely on that first 50, and then it would be a big battle to get back. So for
yeah.
me, it's like yeah, it's also going in with a strategy. Like I know the two breast inside and out. It's like where to push, where to hold back, where to create length, and those kind of things. And to the point, like where I know that 13 strokes on that first lap, like we consistently practice that at training. Whereas the 100, I've never kind of done that. So that's why I guess as well, like I'm really excited about that because of that, because it's like
Yeah.
we've never even tapped into that, and it's like we've gotten to 205.9 without even looking in that sphere,
Mm,
and we've got so that's an exciting piece, I guess.
yeah. What about the entertainment side of sport and maybe even swimming? I guess you're all fighting for, especially in Australia. I know what it's like. You're fighting for you know, covers and newspaper articles and things to be written about and things to be talked about. The more that happens, the more that you're out in the public, the more you expose yourself like that, the more money you make financially and things like that. Are those things important to you at all, or even just a balance of those things important to you, or is it just solely focused on swimming and performance?
It's definitely a balance and definitely shifts when you have success. I mean, for me, like after the Olympics was definitely a bit of a learning curve in that space. Like you learn what to commit to and what not to commit to, and not overcommit and not become a yes
Mm,
man. Because
yeah,
you can make yourself like just busy and unavailable from the pool and dissociate it all.
mm,
And then you're surrounded by people that tell you how good you are, and it's like
yeah,
you don't need that when you're trying to be high performance. You need
yeah,
someone to be honest with you to say like, no, like what the fuck are you doing? Like, come on.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so yeah, like for me, that's a interesting part of it. Like, and I think for me, I will say yes to some of those things when I know it will give something to other people. So, for example, like even today, like I know that someone will get something out of this. Someone will get a small little gem out of this.
for
And like,
sure. Yeah.
I know as well, like for me, like you asking these questions helps me reflect as well. So, like,
Hmm.
I enjoy the reflection piece of it. I enjoy also helping others and seeing others have success. And also, like, there's also that next generation piece. Like, we have an Olympics here in under 10 years now. And, like, if I can inspire 10 kids to swim breaststroke over freestyle, for example, like, I'll be, that creates a legacy in that space. And for me, that's really important as well. So
Yeah.
I think it's like, yes, I'm interested in that space, but I like to ensure that there's a purpose behind that as well, and there's
Yeah.
purpose to my values behind that.
Yeah. Well, this has been fun, mate. I've really enjoyed this. I've wanted to do this for a couple of reasons. One, you're just phenomenal, but I don't understand breaststroke like you do either. So I wanted to dig into that. But I'll be honest with you. I did notice something. I'm pretty good with body language myself. Like I observe things myself, and I've never spoken to you. I don't know much about you, but I did watch the World Championships, and when you did get beaten, you were very gracious, no doubt. You were very complimentary in defeat. You know, you took it well, but I saw something in you that maybe you didn't even recognize in yourself. You didn't like to get beaten that day. I knew it immediately. Like I saw the look on your face, like fuck, that fucking hurt. You know, that sucked. As gracious as you were and as polite as you were, I saw the look on your face, like it stung you, and I liked that, and that's why I wanted to talk to you. I'm like that's a killer right there. That's a guy that I can get behind because yeah, it stung, man. I could tell that stung you, and you want to come back from that. I like that about you, you know?
I appreciate that. Yeah, it definitely did sting a little bit, and definitely like flicked a switch. I guess it's probably the way I'd describe it. And like, I'll definitely come back bigger and better for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he's not the only one on top of you right now. There's a couple of people, like I said, that think they might have a shot at you. So they're coming for you, mate. And I love the fact that you are doing something about it. So stay hungry, stay focused, stay motivated, and like you said, just give it everything you got for next year, mate. And I'll be cheering for you over the next few months. All right.
Thank you, and I appreciate your time today. It's been awesome.
All right. Cheers, mate. Take care. Bye.